So last week, the long-awaited space exploration game No Man's Sky, created by independent development team Hello Games, was finally released, and what followed can only be described as the most polarizing and controversial launch week I have ever seen for a game. Sean Murray is a liar. No man's lie. One man's lie. Where's the No Man's Sky we were sold on? Ah, No Man's Sky is falling apart! Seriously, the anger and vitriol surrounding the gaming community has been astounding. People on both sides, the game's defenders and detractors, have driven the conversation about the game far past the edge of sanity. If someone would have told me a couple of years ago that a little indie game would have caused this much friction in the gaming space, I don't think I would have believed it. It's just insane. So I'd like to take a little time to pick apart what exactly happened with No Man's Sky and its explosive reaction in the gaming community. So what exactly is No Man's Sky? I think a big part of the backlash for the game stems from a misunderstanding about what the game was actually supposed to be. Even leading up to the game's launch, people were asking questions about what exactly you do in No Man's Sky, and the vagueness surrounding the content of the game certainly made matters worse. Honestly, I think Sean Murray, founder of Hello Games and developer of No Man's Sky, perfectly but possibly inadvertently summed up the game really well in an AMA he did on Reddit, where he referred to No Man's Sky as a chill sci-fi game. I think that's the perfect description. It's not an exciting action-adventure in space, it's not a realistic space simulator, and despite its universe-sized play area, it's not the biggest and most complex game ever made. It's a small indie game made by a small indie studio. A little, laid-back, chill sci-fi game. Knowing now after release what the game actually is, though, it's kind of ridiculous to think about how hyped up this game got. Even years before its launch, No Man's Sky was extremely highly anticipated. It's impossible to undersell how much hype and excitement this game garnered. Now, this hype was driven by two factors that worked together: the bombastic and vague marketing behind the game and people's tendency to read between the lines and use their imagination to fill in the gaps. The marketing behind this game for what is essentially a low-key indie title has been absurd, to be honest. Multiple magazine covers, talk shows, first looks, and vague but awe-inspiring trailers all kind of betray what the game actually is. And it doesn't help that Sony helped with the marketing for the game and pushed for it to be advertised as a AAA mainstream title with a full $60 price point. Now, whether the game's $60 price point at launch is appropriate has sparked countless debates, and I don't really know how I feel about it myself, so I'm not going to get into that too much. But I do know that the game is not a AAA mainstream title. It's not. It's a very niche game for people who want a sci-fi exploration game that's down to earth. It's a little game with a big universe about exploring space, looking at creatures, learning alien words, and finding some little mysteries along the way. And that's all the game is, really. The trailers and PR for the game, however, helped make it seem like the game was much more. Like the content of the game was as grand as the scale of the universe. There's nothing wrong with a game being a small niche title, and there's nothing wrong with a game being big and bombastic, but there is a problem with presenting one as the other. Let's take a different example for a second. Inside is an amazing little game that came out recently from developer Playdead. It's a dark little indie puzzle platformer with a somber tone that has been universally well received. Now, could you picture for a second if Inside was advertised like this? Now, this goofy hypothetical trailer would totally misrepresent what the game is about, even though nothing about the trailer is technically false. You do jump and hide and run, so it's not completely wrong, but it's not what the game is really about. Now, imagine that Inside was on magazine covers and TV shows and talked about for years with this trailer. Had Inside been advertised as this grand, explosive adventure, and then come out as a small, somber experience, would it have been as well received as it is? I'm willing to bet it wouldn't be. That is one of the big problems No Man's Sky ran into. It's advertised as a spectacle and delivered a low-key experience. Along with this is the general vagueness surrounding the game. Sean Murray, who kind of became the spokesman for No Man's Sky, has been very vague regarding the content that is in the game leading up to its release, claiming that he wanted to keep some of the mystery of the game alive. The problem with this is that people are very good at filling in the blanks and letting their imaginations run wild. Sean would say something and listeners would fill in the details. For example, he would say something like, "There's over a quintillion planets full of life," and people would think, "Full of life? Whoa, there must be all sorts of life. Simple life, advanced life, civilizations, maybe cities, warring factions, galactic interstellar space wars. Man, this game's gonna be perfect." People really let their minds run wild with what could possibly be in this massive universe, and Hello Games, seeing the excitement for their game, didn't really correct anyone about it. Then as game features changed leading towards the game's release, the team didn't really update their followers as to what features had been added and what features had been dropped. To be fair, all games change over the course of their development, and I can't personally think of a game company that has announced dropped features from the game, but that still doesn't make it right to not mention it. Then last week, No Man's Sky officially launched. The game immediately ran into server issues with some performance problems on PS4 and many performance problems on PC a few days later. And while many people were playing the game and enjoying the chill experience it offers, many others were vocally upset about the game's simple offerings, expecting a more complex experience than the small indie game provided. Then on launch day, there was a controversy about the multiplayer nature of the game, as two players coincidentally found the same star system and same planet, but they couldn't see each other. Now the game is listed as a single player game, and Sean Murray himself has said, "Look, this is a single player game, don't go into it looking for a multiplayer experience, it is a single player game." And if he left it at that, there probably would be no controversy about the multiplayer at all. If he just announced the dropped feature, it'd be fine. But Hello Games couldn't help themselves. They couldn't admit that a feature was scrapped or at least not functional at launch, and so they went on to say chances of two players ever crossing paths in the universe is pretty much zero. Pretty much zero, you say, so not zero? So you're telling me there is multiplayer in the game and I can play with my friends?
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
And no one really knows what the actual answer is right now because Sean hasn't really been clear about whether it is just a server issue or if the feature was never implemented in the game. So everything added together, not a great launch for the game that has been so highly anticipated. And what happens when a game so highly anticipated has a rough launch? Well, apparently the craziest breakdown of a gaming community ever, on both sides of the aisle. I've seen detractors of the game, some proudly stating that they have never and will never play the game ever, which I find kind of funny, discussing that the game is a horrible mess, the biggest disappointment ever, refusing that anyone could possibly enjoy the game. Multiple videos have come up about how the game is different than it was in the trailer. There's even a huge thread on Reddit pointing out all the things that No Man's Sky allegedly promised but failed to deliver. A thread which, ironically, is also pretty full of misinformation and misrepresentation, which I find kind of hilarious. And I get it. It's fun for people to jump on the bandwagon of trashing a game. And No Man's Sky did an excellent job of pointing a target on its own back with launch problems and controversial public relations. But I feel like it's almost past the point of being reasonable. People are picking apart various trailers from years ago and finding little tiny things to complain about. Look, in this trailer you don't see the wanted level go down inside when you're in a building, but in the real game the wanted level does go down when you're inside a building. Sean Murray lied. Look, in this gameplay video you upload discoveries through a beacon, but now you upload discoveries through a menu. No man's lie. It seems like some people have been actively looking for reasons to not like the game that they don't like, searching for reasons to be mad. Is anyone actually mad that your wanted level doesn't fall indoors? Does anyone truly believe that changing the discovery upload to a menu instead of a beacon negatively impacted the game? No, of course not. But it plays into that narrative. It's a game feature that changed, so it must be a lie. And also, to be extra clear about something that I think is really important, it's fine if you don't like No Man's Sky. It's fine if you hate No Man's Sky. It's fine if you think it's the worst video game ever. But what isn't fine, what isn't okay to me, is a disgusting show of disrespect the gaming community has shown towards Sean Murray personally. This is a man who's put years of his life into making a game that's near and dear to his heart, right? And it may not be the game that you personally wanted it to be. But the way the gaming community has turned on this man has been just so incredibly disheartening, and it's gotten completely out of hand. People are throwing as much hatred at him as they are at the actual game, and his name is being dragged through hell and back, and for what? Making a game some people don't like. Seriously, the level of disrespect he's been subjected to has just been appalling and embarrassing. And to think people were sending him death threats when he delayed the game, I can't even imagine what he's going through right now. So like, if you're one of those people, don't do that. Criticize the game, don't be a horrible person to another human being. Anyway, then there's people on the other side of the fence who are so wrapped up in the excitement of the game that they're unwilling to admit that it isn't the biggest and best game ever made. People like this who are so upset about hearing negative critical reception that they shut down Jim Sterling's website with a DDoS attack. And for what? Publishing a review calling the game mediocre. It's just so insane for these No Man's Sky blind fanboys to be so unable to hear a different opinion than theirs that they try to actively shut out other people's opinions. But I mean, I guess the same could be said of a lot of different communities as well. And somewhere in the middle of these two extremes is where the reality of the game probably lies, but unfortunately it's the commentary that I've heard the least. Aside from its technical problems, which Hello Games has and continues to address, the game is, well, living up to being a low-key space exploration game. It's a niche game that will appeal a lot to some people. It's a little game to turn on for a bit, fly around, look at some freaky aliens, then go about your day. I do think that No Man's Sky has been exceedingly successful at that experience. It's not a timeless space epic that some thought it would be, and you know what? That's okay. I'm glad that there's a laid-back sci-fi game out there for people to play. It's just unfortunate that many people didn't know that that's what No Man's Sky was setting out to be. Unfortunate that there was a misrepresentation of the game's offerings, brought about by vague marketing and consumer hype. And I truly hope that in the future, the major conversation can shift from complaining about what the game isn't, to talking about what the game actually is. Personally, I put about 30 hours into the game, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. Hopefully as time goes on, more features will get added, performance problems will get fixed, the price will drop, and the gaming community as a whole will be able to accept No Man's Sky for what it actually is. A small indie team's chill sci-fi game.